Today I'm going to talk about some of the evidence in the case. We've seen a lot of imagination on the part of the Central Intelligence Agency's propaganda department. Today you're going to see the CIA's statement of policy, which was removed from the Langley facility by one of their top men and hidden away somewhere so that he could use it later at his discretion. The director of the Dirty Trick Squad, and I'm speaking about Richard Turnbull Crowley, also known as the Crow in the Central Intelligence Agency, and he had a terrible feeling that in the future it would come out, historians would come to the conclusion and have the truth as to what happened. And he didn't want to be associated as an assassin because it might affect his children and their children and their children. And so he decided to find a writer that he trusted to get all the information to prove what he was going to say. He did this after interviewing two writers that he had a problem with. One died. The other one was very close to the CIA, and he worried that he might not write the book but give all the information back to the CIA to gain favor with them. It became evident to the Crow that his name would pop up because he was actually the guy in charge, really, to start with. And so with that, he decided it was time to take all of the evidence that he had accumulated and sequestered and give it to a writer that he trusted so that he could write a book after the Crow died. And instead of admitting to the assassination, he said it was more to explain and take credit for it. One of the things that the CIA did was write a statement of policy. And that statement of policy was probably for anybody that came upon anything that was the truth and wanted to ask the director or somebody at the top, did we actually do this? And so I guess they needed something to clarify why it happened. So they did write the statement of policy, maybe 32 or 33 bullet points. So the Central Intelligence Agency, 3 people, found him guilty and set his punishment at execution. This was all because that first little mistake with Georgy Bolshakov, with that channel of communication that basically stopped a nuclear exchange, and also a problem in Berlin, might have been another war. I think the Kennedys felt that they could go a little bit further than that. That's when they made the mistake of giving to Mr. Khrushchev information that was borderline traitorous. I believe that in order to substantiate their position, and I'm talking about the 3 who made that decision, they are now, that's a selling technique to the rest of the people with the CIA. And of course, as I often mention, the fingerprints of Allen Dulles are on everything. And it would be like him to continue to assuage anybody who was trying to say, let's do something else. And that would have been a very strong point for him. That, of course, was not Mr. Kennedy's fault. He used his back channel to maneuver with Khrushchev a non-combative situation. Quietly, he agreed to remove our missiles from Turkey and I think Italy too, and said he couldn't do it instantly, but he would do it within a year. He was able to convince Khrushchev that he was serious about working together with him. The word protracted should be upsetting to people because that shouldn't enter into consideration with a person's life. The fact that Mr. Kennedy would be running again and would probably be reelected due to his popularity would mean that the actual trial and the results of the trial may not happen until his third year of his second term. They had already decided what they were going to do, I think, before they even had the meeting. Now they were about the job of putting it together. That, of course, would be necessary because they were bringing in assassins from other countries, at least France anyway, and so they needed to have documents. They also needed to have identification cards made up for Secret Service, for FBI, for CIA, all with the pictures of the people that were going to be using them. They worked tirelessly to look and see if they could see ahead any problem at all that might come up. But because they had the cover-up by the FBI, the other agencies, they really weren't afraid. They knew that they could do what they did do, which was to hide it for at least 62 years now. So you could see why Robert Turnbull knew that when it all came out, he was going to be at the top. And so he had probably the most to lose in terms of his reputation and his family's continuing reputation. And of course, William King Harvey had just organized and run the assassination of the Diem brothers in Vietnam to a success. And so it was just another day at the office for him. I would have to add to that the Secret Service. The Secret Service were the only agency that had control of the body. And between Parkland and Bethesda, there's a couple of movies on what happened. The thing about all of those agencies being involved, even if it wasn't direct knowledge, it would have been pretty easy to see what was coming. And the fact that nobody did anything or mentioned it to anybody first isn't true, because you often hear that people say, well, somebody would have talked. Well, a lot of people talked, There's over 100 people that have talked, including Robert Crowley now, where he told a lot about the assassination. He himself wasn't involved in the planning, but he was what he called a bench sitter, and he made some payments to people and things like that in Dallas that day. I'd like to add to that, future President Gerald Ford was on the commission, and he spoke every day that the commission met and had any substance. He spoke at that evening with J. Edgar Hoover and told them what had happened and how it might be used in the future. There was no love lost at all between the Kennedys and J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover was really a demented man. From the start, he started collecting evidence on everybody in the government so that in the future, if somebody were to come against him for his sexual proclivities or whatever, he would be able to go to them and say, well, you know, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. And he did that for 40 years. There wasn't anybody that felt that they could outdo him in a mud fight. We know from the film and some of the people who were in the area of LBJ's car that prior to the first shot, he jumped and took a dive into the back seat and then made up a story that his Secret Service agent had cautioned him and had been involved in helping to get him out of there. But it was slightly in advance of the first shot. Those two were thick as thieves. If there was anybody in the government more demented than J. Edgar Hoover, it was LBJ. LBJ, and I'm not going out on a limb when I tell you that he may have had as many as 11 people killed in his lifetime. He started his political career by cheating on a election where he had lost the election by like 180 votes or some number in that range. And he sent John Connally down to the county and they went ahead and rewrote. They had a recount. On the recount, there was like 206 or 7 people maybe. I don't know the number exactly, but it's close. They were all for Mr. Johnson. They all voted in alphabetical order. It's a box 13 case or something like that. He even had his own sister killed. He had a guy killed by the name of, his name really doesn't matter, but he was a gentleman who had a small miniature golf course. He was dating Josepha Johnson. He thought that Josepha had told him a lot about the things that he had done. And so he had his henchmen go to the office. He shot and killed him. And he was arrested leaving town. He was tried. He was convicted of murder and sentenced to 5 years probation for a murder in Texas. LBJ could send 55,000 boys to their death in Vietnam. And even sitting in that seat in Washington, he was constantly afraid that his own life might be taken. People that were alive at the time, of course, always know exactly where they were at the time that they heard about the president being executed. What might have surprised the CIA is the furor that happened. It changed the world. I think there was a decision made that getting rid of Robert Kennedy so quickly after John Kennedy would deteriorate Americans' faith in the government. And so it was decided that he would slowly work him out of his job. This, among other things, gives me thought that there may have been 5 presidents who knew about this in advance. One, of course, is LBJ. One is Richard Nixon, who was at a party the night before where the assassination was discussed. And one was George H.W. Bush, who was in Dallas that day and brought with him his 17-year-old son, W. Bush, pictured now through the exponential development of photography as being in Dealey Plaza looking for his father. His father had been picked up and taken to one of the offices that were looking at people. And once they knew he was a CIA agent, they let him go. There were too many threads with trying to prove that he was a real communist. There's the fact that he had been paid with checks from the FBI, canceled checks. There was indications that he had a 201 file with the Central Intelligence Agency. There was acknowledgement that he had been sent from Japan back to the United States to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, and went through illusionary warfare school, and he went through Russian language school. So it would be very, very difficult with all of that to try to tie the Russians to him. Yeah, I think being the type of squirrely guy that LBJ was, he wanted to avoid any major inducements. However, like I said, he didn't mind sending 55,000 young men to die in a war for his buddies in the military-industrial complex. A tremendous amount of money was coming out of Indochina. It was for drugs. And believe it or not, our country, our CIA, was bringing it in their airplanes, Air America, and distributing it to people to pass it around. A lot of money. That continued on up through the Iran-Contra affair. And the reason that they did that was they needed money for black operations. And the CIA needed it, The Joint Chiefs needed it, but that black money was very, very important. Jenkins was a yes man, and so that wouldn't have surprised anybody. Secretary of Defense, however, I would take that up as he was a pragmatist. He did feel as though all the things that he had done, not all the things, of course, he did some good things in the Human Rights Acts. However, what he did in Vietnam and what he did personally, when he actually decided not to run and he retired to the ranch, they say that he had to have psychiatric help almost every day and became extremely despondent. With all the attention and the money that was spent, all the vigor that was used up, and we lost. Yes, General de Gaulle met with Director McCone and LBJ while he was here for the funeral. He also told the Director of Central Intelligence that during the war, or right after the war, there were a number of attempts on his life by the people who didn't want to give up Algiers. And that in one of those attempts, they had the help of our CIA. He knows that's a fact. And to their surprise, he told them that his intelligence people told him that the assassins were French. We know that they weren't all French, but we know the French were included. They would consider Corsica French. Antoine Granini was the first guy that the Sam Giancana people had approached through a mafia person over there. He tried to hire an assassin by the name of Christian David. And Christian David, when he found out it was the president, he turned it down. And then they went to Jean Soutre. And Jean Soutre was the badge man and was probably, and I say probably, the headshot. It goes to show that the United States is not the only good intelligence operating country in the world. If you were to look to the Japanese, to the French, to the English, and probably many others, they will agree that Lee Harvey Oswald didn't do anything. Of course, they know the Russians didn't do anything, but the Russians, probably more than anybody, know what the real story is. I'll scratch your back and you scratch mine. Coming to a country who, in all probability, Mr. de Gaulle knew killed their own president, would make him think that, they probably held America maybe in a little too high esteem. He was aware of the rabid development of opium across Southeast Asia. The Italians, the French, and now the Americans wanted in on it. He was letting them know that he was aware of all this. Well, they're telegraphing the fact that they know what is going on. There's no question but that the hard-charging right people of the intelligence agencies will always look out for themselves first. I think that it was evident to the world that a problem in Cuba would always be the hottest topic in the world and might be sufficient to elicit some sort of a military response from the Soviet Union. This is, to me, the most important admission by the agency. The agency, I've spent a lot of years studying the assassination, but I've spent 3 hard years studying the CIA's propaganda actions, relationships with Claire Booth Luce and her husband, relationships with the Grahams, who owned the Washington Post. The Luces owned Time Magazine and Life Magazine. The relationships, even the relationship with the Post. The editor of the Post at one point was married to the sister of Mary Pynchon Myers and was aware of the ensuing murder of her sister, and was an agent of the CIA. And after the murder, he went to her art studio and he found James Jesus Angleton inside her art studio. And together they found her diary. The story is they said that it was destroyed, but there are some other people who believe that it was not destroyed and may turn up at some point, which would be great for historians. What we've just explained to you is something that would be used in a trial. This is evidence. This is the Central Intelligence Agency's own words. And we have other things. This is a document that is historical. We can thank Robert Turnbull Crowley for getting it out of Langley and eventually getting it to the world. It's so obvious that most of the covering up of everything was all done by the CIA. They controlled so much in the media, but they couldn't control the internet. People who have studied it are finding things on the internet. People are coming out and talking who kept quiet for their whole life, and now they're telling their little things. That's really who we have to study. One of the things that I have studied a lot about is why people wouldn't want to believe this. I think bias has a lot to do with it. In other words, I think somebody told me that maybe 2,500 books have been written on the Kennedy assassination. A lot of people have written more than one. I know some that have written 3, 4, 5. While some of them were really, really great researchers, some of the people who are involved in what I call a cottage industry, the JFK assassination is a cottage industry. They make money off of their podcasts. They make money off of speaking engagements. They make money off of articles that they write and books. They have a subconscious reason to want to continue the hunt. Because when the hunt's over, so is their income. So bias has a lot to do with it. Also bias of the government. You know, their big thing, even though everybody's dead now who had anything to do with it from the government, the problem is that they always worry about people losing confidence in the government. The loss of confidence is a big, big thing to them. And so they're continuing to fight it. The story coming out because they don't want to have to deal with the repair job that will be necessary. So I would say that we have to agree that this is a condemning document directly from one of the top CIA officials, Robert Crowley, the Crow.